This is my PlayStation 2. This is my Xbox One. This is my Xbox 360. And this right here is my PlayStation 3. And this is what I like to call the Philips Sheedy Eye. And the reason...
No, that isn't how you do a game collection. You need to introduce each console, explain who developed it, and... yes, where are my manners? I am the Lord of Games.
Who are you?
Look, Bayonetta.
Oh, yummy!
Yes, now that quote-unquote hardcore gamer is gone, why don't I introduce you to our entire game collection, shall we? Do you remember your first console? The N64, the PlayStation 2, the Xbox 360, the Switch? In that case, you're too young to be watching one. Well, for me personally, my first console was the Magnavox Odyssey, the first video game console ever made. The Magnavox Odyssey was released in 1969 and was more of an overglorified light box than an actual console. To acquire more functionality, the Odyssey would require cartridge-like circuit cards, TV screen overlays, and accessories to be fully functional. As a first console, it's about a D tier. What? Though we all certainly start somewhere, and this was an excellent step for gaming to come. We shall refer to these consoles as the first generation, and in 1977 Nintendo would throw their hat into the ring with the Color TV Game 15. The Color TV Game series is a set of 5 game consoles: the Color TV Game 6, Color TV Game 15, Color TV Game Racing 112, Color TV Game Block Kazushi, and Computer TV Game. And although not a video game, I do feel we should mention Nintendo's Love Tester. Made in 1969, the Love Tester is an interesting little widget, and in a way paved the road for Nintendo's video game lineup. These are the consoles for Generation 1. We shall now move on to the second generation of gaming, a generation fueled by the boom of the arcade game, full of innovation. And we shall begin with the Game & Watch, specifically Ball, which was released in 1980. True to its name, the console features both a game and a digital watch. Next is the ColecoVision. Released in 1982, the ColecoVision allowed for gameplay akin to the arcade, unlike the Atari, though they couldn't exactly get the controller quite right. I don't see how the controllers were usable back then. They appear similar to old telephones. The ColecoVision also has hardware add-ons known as expansion modules. This one in particular, Module 1, allowed for Atari 2600 games to be played on the ColecoVision. Speaking of which, here is the Atari 2600. Released in 1977 by Nolan Bushnell, it was the prime gaming console during the 1970s and the early 1980s. Yes, the Nolan Bushnell, creator of Chuck E. Cheese, created the Atari 2600. Go figure. What is Atari 2600 without a copy of Asteroids? Or the stereotypical game controller? The Atari 2600's controller is likely what you see in cartoons and other forms of media when people are discussing video games despite not having any knowledge on the subject. Atari would also release this behemoth of a console known as the 5200. Released in 1982, the Atari 5200 was meant to be the successful sequel to the Atari 2600. Me personally, I like to use it as a cup holder. And the last console we have of Generation 2 is the Intellivision, released in 1979 by Mattel. Yes, it does have similar controllers to the ColecoVision. In 1982, the Intellivision would introduce the IntelliVoice, introducing voice acting into the world of gaming. Need I remind you of the infamous The second generation of gaming was full of innovation, and here are the consoles that prove it so. After the video game crash came the third generation of consoles. This would produce the boom in the video game industry. And who do we have to thank? None other than Nintendo and the classic Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Famicom system in Japan. Released in 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System is a pioneer in the realm of gaming, allowing gamers to save their progress for the very first time, and select levels for the very first time. Concepts seen as mandatory in this day and age were seen as innovative for their time. And the controller, while simple in design, has plenty of functionality with a plethora of games. Sometimes less is more. Atari would also release the Atari 7800 in 1986. This console was one of the first ever consoles with backwards compatibility, allowing you to play games from the 2600 and the 5200 as well. Though they removed my favorite feature, the cup holder. And in 1986, a company named Sega would throw their hat into the ring with the Sega Master System. The Master System did not sell as well as their rival, though it did see success over in Europe. A cheaper model of the Sega Master System, known as the Sega Master System 2, very creative, was then released in 1990. These are our consoles for Generation 3. The consoles that help popularize video games once again, and allowing for future generations to flourish. Consoles such as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Released in North America in 1991, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System dominated the market thanks to Nintendo's 16-bit graphics, improved engines, and sound waves. Not to mention the console's first-party content. And when it came to the controller, instead of 2 buttons off to the side, this one has 4. Technically 6 if you count the L and R buttons. What about Sega? Surely someone forgot about... Look!
Sega Genesis.
Released in North America in 1989, the Sega Genesis popularized their entire marketing campaign off of a funny blue anthropomorphic rodent. You may know him as Sonic the Hedgehog. Their advertising was often directly against Nintendo, with the slogan, "Sega does what Nintendo don't." Here's the controller for the Sega Genesis. Though not popular in Japan, it made quite a splash in the North American market. Here we have the Neo Geo CD from SNK. Released in North America in 1996, this console was marked at a whopping $400. Yes, the system can play audio CDs, but it had slow loading times that could vary up from 30 seconds to a minute between loads, depending on the game. It wasn't exactly a successful console, though it does have its fans. Here is the TurboGrafx 16, released by NEC and Hudson Soft in 1989 in North America. Although popular in Japan, the TurboGrafx 16 did not meet the same success in North America, despite NEC creating a caveman-like character to be featured in their advertising. Retro gamers may know this caveman as... Bonk! Ah, yes, the Forbidden One. This here is the infamous Magnavox CDI, specifically the CDI 550. You may notice the Magnavox name attached to the CDI. That's because Magnavox made rebranded players for the American market. It also came with one of the worst controllers imaginable. Just why? This model in particular was released in 1994, though the original Philips CDI was released in 1990. Regardless, the console is a commercial failure. Honestly, what kind of video game console doesn't even advertise itself as a console for video games? No, I'm not even kidding. Even low-end PCs beat this thing in sales. It's that pathetic. And yes, there were 3 infamous Zelda games and 1 infamous Mario game that were released for this console. On a more positive note, we have a few handhelds, starting with the Nintendo Game Boy, released in 1989. Although small, it was efficient and got the job done. And Sega tried to compete with the Sega Game Gear, released in 1991. Though it had limited battery life and a rather poor quality of games, so reception was rather mixed. Even Atari would try a handheld with the Atari Lynx, released in 1989. The Lynx was priced at $180, the first ever console with a liquid crystal display. And for the time, its hardware was relatively impressive. Rivalries began to blossom in the 4th generation of gaming, and these were the consoles that played a part. As we transition into the 5th generation of gaming, we go from 2D sprites to 3D animated models. One of the earliest consoles of this generation was the Panasonic 3DO. Released in 1993, this console was met with an incredible amount of hype. Although when it released, it went for $700, and can you guess how many games the console came with? 1. The console was deemed obsolete by its fellow Gen 5 consoles, such as the Sega Saturn. Released in Japan in 1994, the Sega Saturn was deemed rather successful, though in North America and Europe the console was deemed as a failure. It would not be released into other markets until 1995. The Genesis outperformed the Sega Saturn, and it proved to be rather disastrous despite the actually decent library of games. And here is the controller for the Sega Saturn. I'm not certain as to why there's so many buttons on the right side, but Sega still does what Nintendo don't. And yes, it's your turn. The Sony PlayStation 1, or the Sony PlayStation. Released in 1995 in North America, the PlayStation is arguably the most successful console of the generation. Fantastic third-party support, attention to multiple audiences of different demographics, and a fantastic array of games led to the PlayStation becoming a huge success. The controller, as seen here, is also deemed as a classic. In Nintendo's court is the Nintendo 64, released in 1996. Not as popular as Sony's PlayStation with third-party developers, the N64 still had a wide array of games and is still considered a classic by many, despite the controller's infamy. Ah yes, and there's also the Atari Jaguar. It exists.
Released in 1993, this console was marketed as the world's first 64-bit system, but didn't have a lot of games to back it up, and sold under 250,000 copies. Poor sales and a plethora of mediocre games plagued the Atari Jaguar, and its controller... I'd rather not think about it. Though it wasn't the only infamous console, as the Virtual Boy entered the mainframe in 1995. Claiming to be a portable system of displaying 3D graphics, it was more of an eyesore than anything else. These graphics were in red and black and caused plenty of eye strain in many a gamers. And here we have the controller. Do you want to know how many games were on the Virtual Boy? 25. For handhelds, we have the Game Boy Color, released in 1998, home to a plethora of games and backwards compatibility. Here is SNK's Neo Geo Pocket Color from 1999, another console not very popular with third parties. Here is the Sega Nomad, because if the Game Gear isn't broken, then don't fix it, right? Right? Released in 1995, the Sega Nomad is the final handheld console to be released by Sega. The Sega Nomad was neglected, considering Sega wanted to work on the Sega Saturn, leaving the Nomad undersupported, as it wasn't compatible with many Genesis add-ons, and it was only released in North America. Regardless, the 5th generation of gaming is still considered to be rather innovative, and here were the consoles that made it so. Well, no thanks to those four. Next are our consoles from the 6th generation, the
128 bits
era. We shall start with the tragic tale of the Sega Dreamcast, the first console of the generation, released in 1999 in North America. Well, yes, it did have accessibility to the internet, yes, the games provided were good, and yes, it did restore Sega's reputation, but the console itself was considered obsolete by its peers. Why? The competition had newer technology, newer innovations, and with rivals on the rise. This would be the final console released by Sega. And here is the controller. What killed the Dreamcast? If you ask me, I'd say it's the PlayStation 2. Released in 2000, Sony's PlayStation 2 had it all. Ability to play DVDs? Check. Backwards compatibility with PlayStation 1 games? Double check. Internet access? Triple check. The PlayStation 2 also had access to several key games, such as Grand Theft Auto 3 and Metal Gear Solid 2, thus allowing the PlayStation 2 to shine, becoming one of the most successful consoles in existence. And as for the controller, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Next is the Nintendo GameCube. Released in 2001, the Nintendo GameCube itself had finally found its audience proper, though it failed to see mature titles and also failed to use the internet, save for a few games. Though it still sold alright, not as successful as the Nintendo 64, but still well, with a plethora of great games under its belt. Super Smash Bros. Melee. And controllers don't get much better than this. And last of the consoles is Microsoft's Xbox. Released in 2001, even though it wasn't as popular per se as the PlayStation 2, it still found success with its Xbox Live market and established itself well in the North American and European markets, partially due to Halo 2. Though it failed to see success in Japan, and its controller is adequate. For handhelds, we have the Game Boy Advance. Released in 2001, this was Nintendo's most dominant market, and they didn't have much competition either. Not yet, anyway. Released by Bandai were the Wonder Swan and Wonder Swan Color, released in 1999 and 2000 respectively. If I'm being honest, I'm not certain what to make of them. They just existed. They came into existence and they disappeared quietly as such. Regardless, the consoles of Generation 6 are still deemed as classics to this day, except for the Wonder Swan. Innovations and interventions would arise with Generation 7, featuring the greatest trio of consoles known to man. We shall start with the Xbox 360. Released in 2005, the Xbox 360 still had its Xbox Live market, had the backwards compatibility, though was also plagued with the Red Ring of Death, and was still not popular in Japan. The controller is fantastic and deemed a classic. Microsoft would also release the Kinect in 2010. It's garbage. And here is the PlayStation 3. Released in 2006, the PlayStation 3 is known for its compatibility of PlayStation 2 games and its usage of Blu-ray. Though it retained fantastic graphics, the controller retained similarities to the PlayStation 2. Nintendo would enter the market with the Nintendo Wii. Released in 2006, the Wii attempted to attract all sorts of gamers alike. And they succeeded. The motion controls and the wide array of video games contributed to the Wii's ultimate success. And the controller is certainly one of a kind, especially in games such as WarioWare Smooth Moves. For handhelds, Nintendo would release the Nintendo DS in 2004, This model here is a Nintendo DS Lite, which was released in 2006. We also have the Nintendo DSi, which would be released in North America in 2009. Both have PictoChat and access to the internet via Nintendo WFC, though the DSi has the built-in camera. Meanwhile, Sony would release their PSP in 2005 for an older crowd. And they succeeded, being dubbed as one of the most successful consoles ever made. Generation 7 assured blue skies and sunshine guaranteed, to which they did succeed. Though I will admit I am a little biased towards the Xbox 360, partially since it was my first ever appearance in a game. On to the 8th generation of gaming, with the mentality if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Additionally, this generation of gaming was pressured by the rise of mobile gaming. We shall begin with the Nintendo Wii U. Released in 2012, the Wii U was supposed to be the robust version of the Nintendo Wii, and anticipated great sales, but ended up a financial failure. It was also backwards compatible with the regular Wii. The main controller is a gamepad. Although clunky and awkward, it still made do. It was at least better than controllers like the Jaguars. Sony would release the PlayStation 4 in 2013, and it's essentially an upgrade for the PlayStation 3. Backwards compatibility? Check. Similar console? Check. Similar online? Check. Similar controller, aside from this button here? Check. And what was also released in 2013? Well, here comes the Xbox One. This console shall be so fun. There are hardly any games to play. The Kinect is stupidly on its way, and the only thing gamers can say is at least the controller looks good. This console in particular being the Xbox One Series X. For handhelds, Nintendo would release the Nintendo 3DS, a device able to project 3D imagery without the usage of 3D glasses. This model in particular is a Nintendo 3DS XL released exclusively for the year of Luigi 30th year anniversary. Nintendo would also release the Nintendo 2DS in 2013, an interesting looking model, and this is the Nintendo 2DS XL released as a tie-in with The Legend of Zelda. To be honest, we just got this console for Luigi's Mansion on 3DS, partially due to the circle pad. Lastly, we have the PlayStation Vita. Released in 2012 in North America, the PlayStation Vita is Sony's final handheld console. Thanks to the PlayStation Store, the PS Vita has access to many PS1 games. Also has backwards compatibility with the PSP. The PlayStation TV also applies into this category. Released in 2014 in North America, it's the non-handheld variant of the PlayStation Vita. But alas, there is one more. Due to the Wii U's failure, Nintendo released a brand new console, one to get them out of the rut. That being the Nintendo Switch, a Nintendo home console with the ability to play on the go, with Joy-Cons similar to the Wii remotes, giving players access to play with motion controls if they so please. And with fantastic first-party games and plenty of support for third-party games, the Nintendo Switch was deemed a commercial success. And so here is our collection for the 8th generation of consoles. A fine lineup, but the stars truly shine. And lastly, we have Generation 9 with two gigantic consoles, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. Both were released in 2020, and both have received competition from the Nintendo Switch of all consoles. Consoles are meant to showcase games at 60 frames per second and 4K or sometimes 8K quality. Though it's fantastic that the PlayStation 5 has a lot of backwards compatibility with the PlayStation 4's games. Otherwise, the PlayStation 5 would have a lack of games. And here is the sleek and futuristic PlayStation 5 controller. As for the Xbox One controller, controllers remain the same. There's also the Nintendo Switch 2. As of this video, the console has not yet been released. In the meantime, I'm going to reminisce by playing the old Nintendo Switch games. Now, where did I put my cartridge? Oh, silly PlayStation 5. You're so large you're trying to hide other consoles' games. Shame on you. Regardless, here is our entire console collection. If you've made it this far, then thank you for your support. You can support the channel by leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Tell us what your favorite console is, which console do you have fond memories of, and which console do you despise? Conversely, which console do you enjoy? Got a favorite game? Leave it in the comments. Well, we've run out of words to omit, so until next time, this is the Lord of Games thanking you for your support. Fare thee well, and please don't forget to save your progress. Farewell.